General didactics as a theory and methodology of teaching. The proposed study addresses an important theoretical issue: the status of teaching theory and methodology in the education sciences system, stated in modern and contemporary pedagogy. TTM represents the fundamental science of education affirmed epistemologically by specific research object, a teaching activity formally and informally organized, carried out within the educational process, carried out on steps and educational disciplines as the lesson pattern, etc., but also specialized, meeting individual and group consultations, teaching trips, projects, etc. The specific research methodology developed, interdisciplinary, which confirms the quality of TTM, General Didactics, GD, as a sub-theory of the general theory of education. Vivienne Delancher, 1992. Interdisciplinary, which highlights the links between TTM, GD, and the psychology of education, Piaget, Brunner, but also with the sociology of education, Durkheim, Dewey, Kirchensteiner. Specific normativity, which orders the training based on general principles of curricular design, specific principles of organization, planning, achievement, development, and applied at the level of concrete activities, lesson, etc. The didactic principles, Cristea, 2016. The historical context of the research provides an overview of the paradigms stated in the evolution of pedagogy, TTM-GD, confirms the epistemological status acquired in time by general didactics according to the paradigms promoted by pedagogy in the historical epoch. Premodern pre-scientific didactics, elaborated on the basis of the paradigm model of conformity of education, training with nature. Abstract divine, Comenius, Didactica Magna, 1657. Concrete of the educated child, which is good, but which society corrupts. Rousseau, 1762, Emile or About Education. Modern scientific teaching, initiated by Herbart. General Pedagogy, 1860 and 6. Pedagogical Lectures, 1935. Fundamentals of Pedagogy, Ethics, based on the ideal and goals of education. Psychological, based on teaching methods and lesson. General Theory of Education. General Didactics, found at the base of the didactics of the different educational disciplines. Theory of moral education and of religious, professional, aesthetic, physical education. Applied at some levels of education. Pedagogy, didactics of primary education. Pestalozzi, How Gertrude Learns Her Children, 1801. And Preschool, Froebel, Human Education, 1826. Developed at the level of pedagogy, psychological didactics, psychocentric paradigm, Ley, Neumann, Germany, Binet, France, Modern Ideas About Children, 1909, New Education, Maria Montessori, Children's Homes, 1909, Claparède, Child Psychology and Experimental Pedagogy, 1906, Functional Education, 1931, Ferrier, Active School, 1922, etc. Pedagogy, Sociological Didactics, Sociocentric Paradigm, Natorp, Germany, Social Pedagogy, 1899. Durkheim, France, Education and Sociology, 1922, etc. The historical context of the research. Postmodern scientific didactics developed according to technocentric paradigm, pedagogy through concrete or operational objectives, modern, based on scheduled teaching, Skinner, and Full teaching. Carol Bloom, 1950-1960. The paradigm of the global, complex, integrated curriculum approach of education and teaching as a psychosocial activity focused on the objectives of education. Teaching designed at the level of interdependence between the requirements of psychological education, of teaching, defined in terms of competencies, and social, defined in terms of basic theoretical and applied contents of knowledge, validated by the society at different time intervals. The initial stage, Dewey, The Child and the Curriculum, 1902, Bobbitt, Curriculum, 1918, Tyler, Basic Principles of Curriculum and Teaching, 1949. The Affirmation Stage, Bloom, 1956-1971. The Development Stage, Dino, Curricula and Continuing Education, 1979. Brunner, For Theory of Instruction, 1970. Culture, Mind in Education, 2000. Bogdan, Sodorsky, Pedagogy and the Great Philosophical Currents, Pedagogy of Essence and Pedagogy of Existence, 1970. Jean-Marc Gabed, Louis, La Pédagogie Contemporaine, 1988. Margaret Alter, La Pédagogie de l'Apprentissage, 1998. Sorin Cristea, Pedagogy or Pedagogical Science or Educational Sciences, 2016. Theory and Methodology of Training, TTM, General Didactics, GD, evolves. Epistemological as a general theory of teaching. Praxeological as a teaching methodology conceived as a teaching learning assessment activity, ensures the consolidation of the epistemological and praxeological unity and continuity between the theory of teaching, which defines and analyzes the concepts of teaching, educational process, normativity or principles of the teaching activity, objectives, microstructural purposes of the educational process, curricular contents of the educational process, curriculum, curricula, and textbooks, auxiliary materials, teaching methodology, which applies the theory of training at the level of teaching methods, teaching organization forms, strategies, methods, procedures, and the means of assessment, correlation between teaching, learning, assessment actions, models of curriculum design of the lesson. Gabriela, Cristea, General Pedagogy, 2008. The main argument in favor of general didactics as a theory and methodology of teaching. Epistemologically ensured by the fundamental concepts that define the specific object of study, teaching activity carried out within the educational process, organized formally and non-formally on stages in educational disciplines, designed based on the objectives of the training activity and specific normativity, design principles, organization, and completion of the educational process, didactic principles applied at the level of the lesson, etc. Praxeologically involved in clarifying the relations between general didactics, theory and methodology of instruction, and specialized didactics promoted by educational disciplines within the stages of the education system, preschool, primary, gymnasium, high school, etc. Logically supported by the presentation of conceptual and normative arguments that demonstrate the thesis of the paper, proven by bibliographic references of the scientific literature. The arguments that support the approach of general didactics as a theory and methodology of teaching or as a general theory of teaching or educational process highlights the quality of general didactics or theory and methodology as a teaching subtheory of general theory of education, affirmed and developed as a fundamental science of education. Vivian de Lancher, 1992. Emphasizes the praxeological dimension of general didactics, or theory and teaching methodology, which consists in its ability to become the applied didactic for all educational disciplines developed on levels and educational cycles, supports the conceptual, methodological, and practical connection between general didactics and specialized didactics, promoted by disciplines and levels of education, ensures the opening of specialized didactics to the model of science teaching that appeals to the concepts of teaching transposition, cognitive structures of science, the student-teaching contract, Pastio, 1997, mental image, genetic knowledge, and logistics, Piaget, 1996, 1970, 1982, disciplinary matrix, Kuhn, 1976, 1999, curriculum as an educational project, Dino, 1979, 1981, etc. The evolution of general didactics as a theory, but also as a teaching methodology involved in the curricular construction of specialized didactics, establishes the epistemological, logical, and praxeological unity necessary between teaching theory focused on defining the fundamental concepts of general didactics and training methodology, promoted as a model for applying the theory of teaching to a general scale of the whole educational process, by capitalizing the concepts that define teaching methods, forms of organizing the teaching activity, didactic evaluation, training as a teaching learning evaluation activity. Highlights the two development trends of specialized didactics at the level of applied teaching or didactics of science supported from a pedagogical and epistemological perspective, at a general and special level. The theory and methodology of teaching as a pedagogical and epistemological foundation of specialized didactics. It capitalizes on both trends in the evolution of specialized didactics at the level of a curricular and managerial model that ensures the pedagogical and epistemological unity between applied didactics and didactics of science. Cristea, 2017-2019. It capitalizes on the resources of this integrated model at the level of lesson management approached in the curriculum as the main form of accomplishing the education process. Gabriela, Cristea, 2008. Basic component of the learning unit. IT, 2012, Marzano, 2015. Conclusions. Epistemologically, in the historical context of the curriculum paradigm, general didactics represents the theory and methodology of teaching, affirmed as a fundamental science of education. It approached the training at global level, objectives, competencies, contents, methods evaluation, teaching, learning, continuous evaluation with function of regulation, self-regulation of the educational process, open in relation to the existing or available forms of organization, pedagogical resources, and didactic and managerial styles. Deontologically, in the context of the teaching profession, general didactics and theory and methodology of teaching plays a decisive pedagogical and social role. It constitutes the sustainable basis necessary in the initial and continuous teaching of teachers of all specialties from all levels of education, the pedagogical resource necessary for the deep knowledge of the educational process at the level of the unity and continuity between applied didactics and the science of didactics.